Hi, and welcome to the Kelly Kitley podcast, America's Social Worker Unfiltered, where every week I have hopeful, honest, and deeply human conversations with changemakers. And today I am so excited to introduce you to Mary Tilson, who's the owner of Sun and Moon Sober Living. It's also the name of her podcast. She's a certified professional recovery coach with a master's degree in psychology and neuroscience of mental health. She leads retreats and meditations, and she is a woman in long-term recovery from drug and alcohol use. Um, I'm just so excited that this worked out to have you today. Thank you for saying yes and being here.
Of course. I feel so honored to be on your podcast. And I'm just so glad that we've been able to stay in touch since we first met in Chicago at your documentary film, which just inspired me so much.
Thank you. I guess that's a good way to kind of talk about another serendipitous hook of our connection. So we were brought together at an event with a mutual friend who was hosting the showcase of my film. And I think it happened when you came in and we were talking, and I said, "Oh, I grew up above my parents' bar." And you were like, "Which one?" And I said, "The Burwood Tap." And you go, "Oh my gosh, my mom and dad met there." That's the way I remember it. I don't know if that it's the way you remember it or if you knew that coming in. But I thought that was so cool.
Me too. I did not know that coming in. And I was like, did I just hear that right? Because, like, as I've told you, that is like such a core story of our family. And like, it's repeated again and again. Like, my mom approaching my dad at the Burwood Tap and asking him to play a game of Pac Man. And I was just like, how funny that we have this connection.
And then you had me on your podcast, and we've just been cheering each other on from the sidelines, and both of us just celebrated 13 years sober. And will you just tell the listeners what you were saying to me before we pressed record about this like renewal and reflection? Because I think that sometimes the misconception is like you hit a anniversary milestone, especially when you're in longer term recovery, and it's like you don't think about it anymore, and like we're such different people now than we were. But really, anniversaries are so symbolic for like fresh starts, newness, looking at how far we've come. And I know you were just traveling and had an opportunity to be out in nature that is such a spiritual place for you. So tell us, what was it like reaching 13 years?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring this up because even as you're talking about that, like I get the goosebumps. And when I start reflecting on my recovery, like I like to take time to kind of like think about where I was at then and what's really coming up for me each year. And I get so emotional like every time I start to think about it. And especially with talking about like this time of year, with it being spring, it's like my whole body almost like remembers. It's like the days getting longer, this fresh energy. Like I always feel like this is such a positive time to make change. Like it's interesting that you have a sober anniversary in April. I know a lot of other like close friends in the recovery space. And it's funny because I think we often think about January 1st as like the day we're going to make a big change. And to me, like I really think there's a lot of opportunity with the seasons. And maybe that's just because it was my own direct experience. But every time this time of year rolls around, I feel so grateful. I can remember exactly how I felt on that last day. And, you know, I shared recently on my sober anniversary about what that felt like for me. And just like this incredible like heaviness and feeling like I knew I had no choice at that point, but I also felt like I had to accept my life was about to get really bad. Like it was going to be, I was living in Chicago. This was, as you know, like 13 years ago, there wasn't like mocktail menus and all these
No.
fun things to do in the city. It was
Mhm.
kind of like, I'm going to live this boring, lonely, sober life. And that is just the cards that I've been dealt. And it was just so crazy for me because this year I was in Nepal, one of my favorite places in the world. And there is no chance if I was still drinking that I would be like out climbing mountains and living like some of the most fulfilling aspects of my life that I get to live out now. And I was just like, gosh, I
Mm.
think when we're in that place of feeling just so afraid and like so isolated and so alone and so caught up in like all the painful shame of addiction, it's
Mhm.
so hard to see bigger possibility. and what's out there for us. And I just think about like, if that version of me 13 years ago only knew, that's like what makes me feel really emotional to think about.
Sure. And I think that's why we continue to show up and share our story too, because we're hoping, or at least I am, that I can shed light on stick around. It gets better. And that first month or that first week or that first year can be so hard. And also, it's a continued work in progress. So, last month I featured women for Alcohol Awareness Month. In May, I'm featuring women around mental health because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's like we don't get to a place of arrival and then stop working a program. And for me, it's been like chasing the what's next, like wanting to stay on that pink cloud, because when you
Yeah.
receive it in sobriety, it's beautiful and you just want to hold on to it. And I think, you leading these retreats that you do, and having these experiential experiences in places like Nepal, I have to believe that like elevates your recovery. Or I don't want to speak for you. Like, what is that experience like for you?
Oh my gosh, it's so true because like, just going back to the idea of like sharing our stories, like I didn't really feel like, and I think this just was because I allowed my world to become so small when I was drinking. Like my whole world was centered around alcohol. So I had no perception of what a fulfilling life could be like for someone my age at that time.
And
And
how old were
so
you when you got sober?
I was in my early 20s. I was 23.
Oh my
So like,
gosh. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, I'm never gonna get married. I'm never gonna date. I'm never gonna do anything fun. Like it was just
Mhm.
like this whole like storyline that played out. So it is so my favorite thing in the world is to be able to lead retreats, and one more point of connection I have to mention to you is that Carrie May and I met at that event where you were screening your documentary. And then we both realized that individually we love to run retreats. And
Sure.
now we've collaborated and we run sober women's treats together. And she's been like the best partner to work with. So
Was
that
she
was
in
like
Nepal
another,
with you?
yeah. So we, not this year, but we collaborated last year
Oh
and did
my
a recovery
gosh.
retreat.
Oh
Yeah.
my
We brought a group
gosh.
of people who are all in recovery to Nepal.
Mm.
And yeah, it's the most rewarding thing in the world to me because I think it combines the fact, or it combines like this need that we all have to have a sense of community and people who really understand what that struggle is like that so many of us have gone through alone.
Mhm.
And layered on top of that, like there's so many aspects of retreats where like, which to me have been so essential to my recovery. So
Mhm.
movement, I mean, I obviously mentioned community, but getting outside in nature, finding like healthy food, like all these other
Mhm.
aspects of recovery that have made it really work for me. And we get to have fun. Like it
Mhm.
totally has disproved that whole idea that I used to have that like a sober life is boring. I'm
Mhm.
sure it's like whether you're in the rooms of recovery or at a social event with a bunch of people in recovery who have
Mhm.
these like wild paths, it's some of the most fun, hilarious, like awesome people to be around that can actually just embrace the full spectrum of our
Mhm.
humanness. Like we can
Mhm.
have the raw, vulnerable conversations and talk about the hard stuff that I found so difficult to talk about. And we can just laugh nonstop and we don't need alcohol involved.
Imagine that. Certainly at
Yeah.
23, you didn't, nor did
What?
I. Certainly at 23. I mean, because I think I went to my first meeting at 21 or 22 in Lincoln Park down the street from my parents' bar. And I was like, oh, no, that this is not me because everybody was so much older than I was. And I
Yeah.
didn't have the resources to know, really where else to go. I went to one meeting and never went back until my 30s. So, was it important for you at that time to connect with other people your age?
Yes, absolutely. And I had the same experience. So I went to treatment at Hazelden in Chicago, and I was the youngest person there by far. I went in two separate times in a period of about 3 years. And the first time it was more like to please my parents, and I was just
Mhm.
kind of going through the motions. The second time I was really committed to being there. And it was an incredible program. And yeah, at the same time, I didn't really have people my age that were in it. And so it was always, I was always kind of like looking for reasons why I wasn't like them and I was different and I couldn't relate. And so I had a kind of unique story. And I wouldn't suggest this as the solution for people, but it just happened to be how my own path unfolded. But I ended up traveling to Southeast Asia on a backpacking trip because um, I knew that I needed to leave my career in digital media because there was so much alcohol involved in all of the relationships that I'd built. Like that was the identity that I had in that office. And I ended up doing my yoga teacher training while I was still working that job, saving money. I knew I wanted to go and travel. And I ended up getting this opportunity when I went to travel, which I thought was going to be a 3 month backpacking trip. It ended
Mhm.
up being years that I lived over there. But I ended up working at a yoga and meditation retreat center. And I found that, temporarily, like I really had trouble connecting with people, finding people my age in the recovery community.
Mhm.
And I think that that was also just me, like maybe not putting enough effort into that. But
Sure.
what I found was like, I really found this sense of connection within people in the yoga community when I was living at a retreat center who were seeking healing. And maybe for them, it wasn't addiction, but it was like mental health struggles
Mhm.
or whatever the thing was.
Mhm.
And we could all connect over this shared experience of really desiring a life that was more built around like vulnerability and connection and community. And there
Mm.
was so much more to it than just practicing yoga. But that's where I kind of found my community. But I will say that I realized during that time that while, yes, this was like a really great way to connect with other people and find community through being really real and developing these new habits, I was like missing that connection with people in recovery from addiction.
Sure.
And like when I would go back home and get that in meetings, I was like, these are my people. Like I
Mhm.
need this too. I feel like that's just a part that's really hard to replace. I don't know if
Sure.
that's been your experience.
Well, absolutely. I mean, anybody that I've met, I shouldn't say anybody, most people who I've met, and they say they're in recovery from substance use disorder, it's like an immediate connection. There's just
Absolutely.
a deeper understanding. And I think that's similar as if like you met somebody who went to the same college as you did, that you're finding a commonality there. And they're different levels, but like that's some real deep shit if you're talking about like, oh yeah, I I am a recovering addict as well. You know what I mean? Like there's just a deeper understanding and you're more open to telling your story to somebody to say like, "Oh yeah, me too."
100%. It's so funny. I just had that experience when I was in Nepal last month. On one of the last days, I was staying in, they have these tea houses. And so everybody at the end of the day sits around and you end up chatting to people from all over. And this guy asked me what I do. And I talked about the work that I do in recovery. And he's like, so, like, what got you into that? I think he was trying to like suss out if that was my personal experience. I was like, my own experience. Like, I'm in recovery. And he was too. And it just immediately, we just like dropped into such a deep level. And I was
Mm.
like, I thought about it afterwards where I was like, I used to have so much shame about my recovery. And the first 4 years that I was sober, I never ever talked about it. Like I wanted to move across the world and just be a new person and just forget that this part of me ever existed.
Yeah.
And I realized like I was connecting completely like living in this state of total disconnection from
Mhm.
myself. And it was like when I learned to actually own that part of me as something that is like such an important part of my story and really the reason that I'm interested in all the things
Yeah.
that I'm in now, like I can't separate the fact that I love hiking and I love traveling and all of these things from the fact that I have a history with addiction, because that's what propelled me in that direction. And
Mhm.
so, like, to be able to own that, like, I just thought about after I had this amazing conversation with this guy who, like, shared so many of the same interests and really had a really deep way of thinking about, like, why we do the things we do. And I was like, if I hadn't been able to share honestly why I
Mhm.
do the work that I do, or
Mhm.
even what I
Mhm.
do, that never would have come about. And so when I say that when I was younger, I felt like I wasn't really able to find my people. It's because I was hiding myself, I wasn't letting anyone find me.
Way to take ownership for that one.
Yeah, I was just like, I'm gonna hide out in my apartment and pretend that, people are just gonna like fall from the sky.
Sure. Well, and I think now there's been movements like Mobilize Recovery and recovery.com and other programs that actually go to college campuses to, bring people together who are younger and live in such a binge drinking world in their culture on campus. But I guess rewinding for a minute, you hit the nail on the head. I think part of it is the shame that connected you and this guy that you were talking to, because there was a vulnerability there that I think when we're in recovery, we're in tune with. So it's not the same as, oh, you went to that college too? Like we have that in common. It's deeper. Of saying the stuff that maybe we used to hide from, or feel so ashamed of.
Absolutely. And it was like,
Yeah.
I could feel it. It's like we were both like suddenly like leaning in, like we
Uh-huh.
saw each other totally differently than if we had just kind of hovered over the
Mm.
surface. And it brought up a lot of like big vulnerable questions that are like alive in our lives right now. Like one of the things that he was talking about, like, do you think it's interesting that now we're like climbing mountains and chasing these new forms of highs, and like
Yeah.
at what point is there healthy pursuit of goals, and at what point are we, and like asking these really deep questions that
Mhm.
also had to do with like career path and like all these other things
My gosh.
that were like, it's like, wow, we just met. And suddenly I know so much about like
Mhm.
the deep insecurities that you hold and the things that like, I know so much more about you as a human. And
Mhm.
you've taught me like opened up a lot of interesting questions for my life to contemplate, and I just think that like, it's
Mm.
so funny. I don't know what it is about us as humans that like, like we feel safer when we're just kind of like hovering above the surface and,
Mhm.
oh, how was your hike today? And what do you think about the doll bot? And are you
Yeah.
enjoying the local food? Like all these like
Mhm.
little simple questions that we could just repeat every time we meet someone.
Yeah.
But to find those like points of connection that invite us deeper, like that is such a it just makes me feel grateful to be in recovery, honestly.
Yeah. We're all craving that connection, deep connection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, my husband does joke that I still try to have those conversations out socially, like when we're at a party and he's like, you're like the conversation stopper because people are like, what? And I'm like, well, at least they know it's because I'm in recovery and I'm a psychotherapist. So they know what they're getting themselves into. But you walk away from those conversations. And I think it's similar to being in the rooms of 12-step meetings, right? Like you're in a room with total strangers and yet you share some of your deepest, darkest hurts, and people can relate, which I think is a game changer.
Absolutely. And I think that like recovery rooms can be such a great practice space to exercise that muscle. And
Mhm.
so we're used to like, if somebody asks, how are you doing? To
Mhm.
give a real answer and to know that it's actually safe to do that. And that, there are people that can actually handle hearing the answer and it's not going to jeopardize your connection or,
Mhm.
ostracize you. And so I think that some people like being in those situations, I'm the same way. Like I have a hard time. Like I went from being from someone who was always hiding and having so much shame about sharing parts of myself to now
Yes.
I'm like, I want to get real with people because
Yeah.
those are like the best kind of conversations to have. But I do find some people are just kind of not ready for it. And I
Sure.
understand that too.
But being able to lead by example, and being able to give people permission, I think, who do feel scared. And as much as social media gets a bad rap, for a host of reasons, I think it's also changed the way people can connect and feel less alone. And what I've seen since our time in sobriety is that there are so many platforms for people to find their people and, books to read and podcasts to listen to, that everybody can find some connection in somebody's story.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more. And I just think it does such a good job of normalizing the conversation
Mhm.
because also, like, the way the algorithm works is that when you show interest in something and you start following people, you start seeing more and more of it. And so, like, in my world,
Yeah,
everybody talks about being sober. Like it's
same.
in the
Mhm.
world that I lived in before, it was like that there was so much shame and everything around that. And so,
Mhm.
I think that I love like podcasts and the way that social media can be a really good entry point for people who have a lot of shame or feel terrified about the idea of walking into a room. Like
Mhm.
I know that until I actually had this experience, my biggest fear was that I would see someone from my office. And the day that it happened in Chicago, we were both in a recovery meeting. Like,
It
they
did
were
act
there
that was
too.
your
Like
biggest fear, and
they're
it
not
actually happened?
Yeah. And I'm like, but it just occurred to me in that moment. I'm like, they're not here to go tell on me. They're here
Exactly.
too.
They're there for
Like,
the
it's
same
like,
reason.
yeah.
Right.
So what am I afraid of? But I
Right.
think we need to have those,
Mhm.
experiences. And so now there's just so many different entry points for
Yeah.
people to get there because
Mhm.
it is like when you have a story for so long that I'm going to be rejected if people find this out about me and, there's going to be all this judgment and all these things are going to happen. It
Mhm.
can be really, really scary. And I think, as somebody who dealt so much with shame, I remember I did start sharing more openly. Like now I post all the time about sobriety. I have a whole handle dedicated to it on Instagram and I always share on my anniversary. But the first time that I did that was like 4 years in. And I remember I was so afraid up until that point. Like even the idea of voicing it out loud, I was like, my
Mhm.
throat would tighten up and I would get like, I'd feel shaky.
Mhm.
But I realized when I did that, the feedback was so positive. And like I was getting DMs from really unexpected people or somebody saying, like, oh, my friend sent me your post. And I was getting these private messages.
Mm.
And it just became so much more important to me to have those conversations with those people
Mhm.
than like the made up person from high school or whoever that I'm
Mhm.
like projecting judgment onto myself from. I'm like,
Right.
but I had to have that experience firsthand and just feel like that deep sense of connection and know exactly what it was like to be that person on the other side sending the message of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm hearing this. Like, I
Mhm.
didn't know this about you. And
Yeah.
like that is what makes such a big difference to me.
Mm. So you get sober at 23 after going to Hazelden, then you backpack in Southeast Asia and live on like a yoga center, yoga meditation center. Is that for
Yeah, it was
years?
a very unexpected turn of events. So basically, I had after I got out of treatment at Hazelden, I was going on nights and weekends while working my job. I did my first yoga teacher training, which was also a nights and weekend program, basically to fill the time. I was like
Mhm.
in love with yoga. It became my new thing, and I could tell it was making such a huge difference in my recovery. I didn't really understand why at that time. I
Mhm.
just knew, like, and I became fascinated by it. I wanted to learn more about the philosophy. So I did my teacher training, number one, to have an excuse why I wasn't going out on the weekends and to fill
Uh-huh.
all that time to learn more about yoga. I never really thought I would have a desire to teach, but I did. Like, after I went through that process, I started to be asking these questions of like, do I want to be in this job in Chicago? Is this actually fulfilling? How much of this was I excited about because I could go out drinking with my coworkers all the time and there's a beer card in the office? So
Yep.
in the midst of asking all these questions, a friend of mine told me that she was taking this 3 month trip to
Uh-huh.
Southeast Asia, and I knew nothing about it. Like it's crazy because I couldn't even pinpoint on the map at that time, like some of the countries we were talking about going to, but there was just something in me that was like, I need to go. I want to do that. And so I took time and like saved up money and had a plan around it. It wasn't like a total impulse decision. But when
As we have a
I
tendency to do.
I know exactly. They say like don't make any major life changes in the first year. I'm like, well, I moved to Cambodia. No, it was more thought out than that. But when I got there,
Yeah.
I got to this yoga and meditation retreat center. And now when I look back on that, I actually think in a way for me that was almost like a next step from treatment where I was like, when it can be so helpful to have like these daily practices and a routine and an environment that supports your recovery. And so all of a sudden I'm in this retreat center and there's no alcohol allowed. There's like a very disciplined routine about like you
Mhm.
wake up, there's a gong where you wake up and, come out of your grass hut and practice yoga and meditate. And then you sit
Mhm.
down and you connect with people and share meals together. Alcohol was like a non-issue because it
Mm.
wasn't even allowed there. And I had really never experienced that level of like socializing and connecting with people and having fun where like nobody's talking about drinking. It's
Yeah.
just like a non thing. So for me, it was like such a supportive environment to get more practice as a teacher, learn from other teachers in that environment to really support my own recovery because I was developing these daily practices that were so helpful for me
Mhm.
and discover that I actually have this like incredible passion for traveling and running retreats. And the more that I was talking to other people, like, again, it was like my world had become so small. I never thought that I could travel the world and organize groups to come out and go to places like Cambodia and Bali and Costa Rica. And like that thought
Wow.
never crossed my mind. But as I started to talk to other people, my mind was completely shifting. And I would be like, how do you live this lifestyle? You know, people who have been living there for years.
Mhm.
And now it's a lot more common to live this like digital nomad lifestyle and work remotely. But
Sure.
to me at the time, I had like no like
People
concept of
weren't doing
people.
that at your age 13 years ago. I mean,
Yeah. So it was mind blowing to
yeah.
me in like a very exciting way. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I spent a year living at this yoga and meditation retreat center in Cambodia and running retreats there. And then from there, I got opportunities to work in different like resorts and retreat centers and started running my own retreats. And
And
yeah, I
now you're
spent
in
about 5
Colorado.
years. Yeah, now I'm in Colorado, which is where I went to school.
Got it. Okay, so it was a full circle moment.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was and such a powerful one because it's funny. At the time that I went to school at the University of Colorado in Boulder, I thought like there is no way you can be in this town and
Mhm.
not be drinking and partying. Like that was what,
Yeah.
again, my whole world, this small world that I had created.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm like, how could you be in Boulder and not be out hiking every day and enjoying
Sure.
the mountains? Guess
Mm,
how many hikes I went on when I was a student at CU living in Boulder for 4 years with the Flatirons like right there.
stop. How many?
One. And my friends and I thought it was like the most, like the biggest deal ever that we had like gone and hiked up this mountain when we could have been day drinking. We were so proud of ourselves.
And now I see you doing like two a day, like a sunset and a sunrise, or, I mean, you're out in nature. I have to believe that's so healing for you. And probably why you live where you live rather than back in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that's been really cool to just see in my own experience and also like I love sharing this with other people too is that things like hiking, like there's this natural high. I was on a sunrise hike yesterday, and it's like the high that I feel like when I get up to the Royal Arch and watch the sun come up, like that is, I mean, that blows away any sort of substance high without any of the negative consequences. And of course, like it
Mhm.
takes upfront effort. You know, we have to earn that and we have to like, it starts with, we need to actually like get ourselves on the trail. And it's not as easy as just pouring a drink,
Mhm.
but your body does actually start to crave that. Like I
Mhm.
never would have thought when I was a student at CU, like drinking and partying every day and through various stages of my life after that, that I would crave like going out and having a hike. And that would be something to look forward to because it was just like, no, I'd so much rather just have a drink or hang
Yeah.
out, you
Yeah.
know? But
Mhm.
it's so yeah, I think that like that's been such a big part of my recovery is just having these healthy practices that are naturally rewarding
Mhm.
and really allowing myself to take that in and also take in the fact that there's no consequence on the other side of it. Like
Mhm.
I still wake up on Sunday mornings and it like I sometimes just feel so grateful that I don't have to deal with that anxiety and shame because I still remember it so well.
Well, you've also built an entire lifestyle and career out of this. So I think that part of it is the influence too of who you surround yourself with, right? Like it's hard to be the only one in the group of drinkers who's going out for a hike every day, because everybody else around you, that's not the first thing they're thinking of. But now you are around like-minded people who crave those same highs, quote unquote, so to speak, in recovery.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I think that's such an important point. And that goes along with making any sort of change, whether it's like to nutrition or exercise. Like, if you're surrounded by people who aren't on board with that, you can definitely experience like the pushback or the comments or whatever it
Mhm.
is, like the eye rolls. Whereas, like, if you're in an environment around people who are making similar choices, and that's again why I think having sober community is so important and also like why it's so cool that the virtual space opens up so much more room to connect with different people
Mhm. Mhm.
because we're so wired for connection and belonging, like we all crave that deep down. And so if the story that we've had our whole life and I grew up like the way I grew up, like in my family and in our community, it was
Mhm.
like alcohol was how people socialize. That's what we do for fun. That's how we connect. It was like
Mhm.
there were all these really positive associations with alcohol and community. And so I had to really like learn to separate those two things. Otherwise, I did
Mhm.
struggle with that feeling of like, I'm so alone. Like, I'm the messed up one.
Yeah.
I'm boring. I'm
Mhm.
all of these
Mhm.
things. But
Yeah.
like having that positive reinforcement of other people that are like, oh, there's actually people who like wake up and their first thought is not like, let's go to brunch and drink Bloody Marys and then hop from one bar to the next. Like they want to go on an adventure.
Well, you are certainly just inundated with good positivity. It is like the energy around you and the way you speak and light up when you talk about these experiences. And one day I will get on one of these retreats. I think I reached out to you when you posted something about going to Patagonia, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go on that trip. One day, that is on my
I
bucket
would
list,
love that.
is to go on one of your retreats. How many do you do a year?
It really depends. So this year I'll have three. In the past there's been more than that. Like there was a
Okay.
time when I was traveling and doing it more full time, but yeah, it kind of
Mhm.
depends. But this year will be three. Carrie and I are have putting some plans together for next year, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, it also depends like whether it's a big international retreat or long weekend ones.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Well, and people can find you in my show notes, how to follow you on Instagram and your website. Are you still doing one-on-one private coaching outside of the groups that you facilitate?
I am, yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
And then my last question for you is about mental health because it's about progress, not perfection, right? And a lot of times we have this comorbidity with our drinking and drugging behaviors. For me, it was trying to quiet the anxiety. It was trying to numb out, flashbacks from prior traumas. And I still struggle with anxiety. I run on the anxious side. I'm very high energy. And so for me, that still is a thread that runs strong throughout my day to day. I just manage it a lot better than I did when I was drinking. And so I'm wondering if you have anything that you're maybe working on today, whether it's mental health related or a character defect or anything that you're like, this is what I'm working on in my recovery today.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring this up because that's like one of the most important messages I think for people to understand around addiction and substance use. It's like, yes, we can see our drinking as a problem, but usually it's also the solution and, the thing that we're solving for. And so for me, like there was so much that when I think about alcohol and I was using cocaine and Adderall, it was like
Mhm.
I had to really address like there was anxiety. There was also this like incredible high standard that I set for myself and this perfectionism of like, I have to be able to like, maintain a really high GPA, but also like be the sorority girl and go to all the drinking events and go
Yeah.
out every night. And like, there was just so much that like, even when I think about that now, I'm like exhausted just thinking about it. But that comes down like perfectionism comes down to this like much deeper like feeling in our nervous system that we're unsafe if we're not perfect or if we're not performing or and
Mhm.
that like shows up I still feel that show up in my body like
Mhm.
and I've just definitely learned practices now of how to be okay with not saying yes to everything and like honoring the fact that I'm actually a little bit more introverted. Like I need time to be alone to recharge and
Mhm.
I don't need to be the social butterfly. I don't need to be the life of the party. And that was kind of hard,
Mhm.
especially like I think in a world that kind of rewards the extrovert and like the really outgoing person who's always, that person. And like I think about like, yeah, cocaine felt like a miracle drug because I could bounce around the party and talk to everyone and have endless energy. And I cringe
For
thinking about how
naming
fast
that.
I was talking to
Yes,
everybody. And so now,
absolutely.
yeah, now it's like making peace with that part of myself. And it really does. It's funny because this past weekend, I was kind of settling back into being back in Colorado and I'd been away for a while and I really just needed to relax. And I spent pretty much the whole weekend with me and my dog. And I was like, this is like the best feeling ever of just like
Mhm.
reading. We were going on hikes. And of course, like I really value community and friendship. And I've,
Mhm.
made a point to go connect with friends too. But I'm like, that would have been like, there would have been this story in my mind before of like, what a loser, like, what are you going to tell people you did this weekend?
Sure.
Like, and I'm just like, no, it's so much of it is like honoring my needs and accepting myself for who I am, which is actually not a party girl most of the time. Like, I'll party with you on a hike, but I don't want to be out all night.
Well, and that you can do both. I think when we're kind of stuck in these dysfunctional patterns, it's like all or nothing, right? And it's like, well, you can be an introvert and you can be an extrovert. You don't have to be all
Yeah.
or nothing or one or the other. It's like there are lots of different flavors of who we are at different times in our life, too.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I know. Like, aren't we so quick to just put ourselves in a bucket? Or it's
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
get fixed in these identities. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's definitely something that I've learned through this process and like practice of recovery is that we're always changing. And especially like with our lifestyles change and the pressures that we have because of various things. So
Yeah.
like giving ourselves to just be human and evolve and adapt.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for saying yes for being here. I really appreciate your time, Mary.
Oh, thank you for having me on. And I hope we can see each other in person soon. I've got to visit family in Chicago. So
Yeah, come on. And now is the best time to come to Chicago between now and August, or October, but that's about it.
I know summer in Chicago is like one of the best things
It is the
ever.
best. It is. Oh. Well, for everybody listening, just a gentle reminder to be the change you wish to see in the world, whether that starts internally within your family, your community, and be the ripple we wish to see in the world. Thank you so much for listening.